Okay, this video will cover layout for people that have a horizontal navigation. Before we get there, I want to cover a little bit about images, in particular big background images, because that's very in right now as far as web design. Don't ever do stuff just because it's in. Obviously, as a graphic designer, you want to solve the problem, not chase the trends. But let's say that that is what works out the best for you. I just want to talk about a few things about that. First of all, you really should go out to your folder that you're using on the current folder that you're working on, make a new folder in here called images, and put the folder in, or put the image inside of the folder called images. I'll show you what happens if you don't do that. And I'll show you that because mine doesn't call for a background image, so I'm just going to end up deleting it. And I want you to know where all this is coming from. So back at the W3 schools under backgrounds, you go down far enough, it talks about putting images in there and fixing the position and so on. So let's go back to Dreamweaver. I'm going to use an experimental image because it really helps you to see what's going on. So what we're going to do is, let's do it this way. This time we'll go to the CSS panel, CSS designer panel, and we will go to the body tag because that is where you would put a huge background image. So I will find body in here. I will go to backgrounds. I will go to background image, and right here it says enter the file path. This is where I'll click on the little folder here, and I'm going to go to a spot. This is what I suggest you don't do, but I went to a spot on my computer that had the image, and I want you to see what happens. Click on open, and basically it's saying, hey, where'd you get this image from? It's not part of the folder structure. Would you like me to add it? And you click yes. And the bad part about that is that it just ends up, unless you create, well, actually you could create a new folder right here. In fact, let's do it the right way. So inside of here, we are going to create a new folder, and we will call it images, and enough said. So that's still not a bad way to do it. It copies it over here automatically for you, puts it in the images folder, save, and Bob's your uncle. Okay, so here it comes. You start to see it up here. And if we do a preview, see right now by default, we've just got a little piece of this image. And I'm not sure I can go over here and make my browser window any small. I can. Okay. So you can see it's just kind of stuck there up at the corner, which is typically what you want with an image. But as you can see by the X of that humongous image, we're not even, close to showing 25% of it right now. This look probably more like what you're used to seeing. What we're going to do is find background size, and we're going to change that to cover. And you get a pretty good idea already what it's going to look like. Oh, I forgot to do a save all. Let me do that. So now you can see we're starting to see a lot more of the X here. So we're seeing the top portion of the image. And of course you would choose an image that is wider than it is tall for regular web design. So just two more quick things. If you had a lot of vertical content here, you don't want the background to scroll as you're scrolling with the text. Generally you don't. So I'll show you how to fix that. And then also you see if the website is just right, you start to see the second copy of the image. And typically you wouldn't want that with a big image, especially if it was a very visible image, meaning you could tell the end. If it was kind of a repeating texture or something, it wouldn't really matter. I'm going to go to background attachment and set that to fixed so it won't scroll when the user scrolls. And then we're going to change the repeat to none. Background repeat, click on this, and we're going to pick this option which says no repeat. I want to show you in full what the code looks like here and sometimes what can happen. I accidentally clicked on background position and it started to write code in there. So be on the lookout. You probably really should, instead of be on source code, you should be on main CSS when you're writing CSS over here in the panel and scroll to what you're working on so you can see if it accidentally does this, because it could get confusing later. Although it is set to 0, but still, we don't want that in there. So we're going to delete that. But you can see the main thing is the background size to cover, the background attachment set to fix, and the background repeat to no repeat. And you may want to experiment with this. But anyway, that's how you do a big image. Now we'll move on to the important stuff for the header. But first, since my design doesn't call for it, I'm going to get rid of all of this. So background image, background size, yeah, basically all of that stuff. Okay, so now we should be looking the same again. And so our main thing is, in our design, or my design, I have this H1 tag first, and then the nav comes up against it. We're going to make that happen with floats. So floats are a way to make a chunk of information on the web, whether it be text and image, float next to each other. So we wrote the code for this as just an H1 tag. So let's continue in that fashion. And what we're going to do, and I'll show you in here in case you want to write it this way, is we're going to go to, we've got the H1 tag selected here. If not, we would scroll to it. And then we want layout. And we are going to find floating in here. And we are going to set float to left. And you can see it wrote that in here for us. And now that is floated to the left. And then the navigation, which was next, comes up next to it. Floats in next to it. Now you can see we're getting closer. One little issue though, because we wrote it for H1 tags in general, it applies to all H1 tags, not just one in the nav. And as you can see right here, what happens with this H1 is that the footer comes up and floats right next to it. So probably the best way in this circumstance to fix that would just be to say we only want H1 tags that are in the header to float. And now the other ones do not. But the other ones now do not have the same style as before. And if you wanted that, super easy fix for that would be to just copy all this, paste it, make it apply just to H1 tags, and of course get rid of the float. Then your H1 gets its property back, or its look back that it had before. And but in particular, this one's doing exactly what you want the H1 that's in the header is floating. So let's move in this direction more, get some spacing around here. And if you get confused about spacing, one of the things that really helps is having a background color like we did here that's temporary. Also look back on the W3 schools to the box model. But we can tell right now that we need to apply some padding up at the top of this header. So we'll go ahead and do that. If I select here, it should highlight that over here, and it did. And we're going to go into layout, and we're going to scroll down until we see padding, and then we are going to put in some padding for the top. And let's try 8 pixels, tab away, see what that does. We're just trying to get those lined up, and actually that looked like that was a pretty good guess. I put in some padding on the left of the H1 to get it to look more like my design. Now what we need is to get the padding between these two, and we actually have to apply it to this guy right here, and there's that special way to do that you might have seen when we were talking about navigation itself. I'll show you. I'm basically going to steal from the H3's code here, paste something in, and then just modify it a little bit. Okay, and then I'm just going to paste this in where it should be, which is right under this list item here, just for cleanliness. So what this is doing is it's saying just the first list item, that's what this first child means, put a padding in this case I just guessed at 200, and that pushes those away. Okay, and then now let's work on giving us some space up at the top. Make a guess at about 20 pixels to push this down to equal the design in Photoshop. You would think that maybe we could just go to the header and add 20 pixels of padding here. The problem is since the this is a different color than the background, it would just push it down and you'd see the background color behind it. So we actually need to add 20 pixels to the H1 and 20 pixels to the top of the list item anchors. So for the H1 in the header, adding 20 to that would bring that up to 28. And then we just got to find where this is in the code. That's our list item anchor. And since the padding was written in shorthand here, probably easier in this case just to go over and take care of it in here. Under layout, we'll go to the padding and we'll change the top up by 20. So that would make this guy 34. And you can see that just broke all the padding down into the 4 individual elements. And let's take a look at this in the browser. And that's looking better on the top. I probably need a little more on the left and a bit more on the bottom. Okay, so you get the idea to, you're just going to go back and change numbers. So I put the H1 over a little bit further by 5 more pixels, went into the list item A, and increase the bottom by 10 more, bringing it up to 24 in my particular case. Still have some work to do up here, but we're going to get back to that. And in the meantime, let's go ahead and center this stuff per my design. Now, if you have a lot of stuff coming up later, like you're bound to have more paragraphs, there's no sense centering all of it. And there's probably no sense just trying to center everything in the section. So I think what makes the most sense in here is to create a class called center, and then we'll just apply it as needed. So one way to do that is just come over here to the selector button, click plus, put in the period to make it a class, and then we'll call that center, hit enter, and then for that we will go to text and we will go to text align, click on center, go to our CSS, which as I said before we should probably be doing as we're doing that, but here is center, and it took one more click to get that to show up, but there it is, text align center, and then we can go ahead and start applying that. So back in the source code, we know we need to apply that to the H2, so we'll give a space here, start to type in the word class, and there is center, and we'll do the same to the paragraph. Getting there. Let's clean up this little mess that I did earlier. I mean, I still want it to be obvious that I need to fix it, but I really shouldn't have put an H1 inside of a paragraph. So let's just simply move some things around here, close out the paragraph right here temporarily, and then we'll surround the whole bottom part with an H1 tag, which should really stick out still like a sore thumb now. All right, in the next video, we'll continue on with this, give this some spacing, and talk about what we need to do to make all this good.